Last night, we brought you the story of the Marist College students who are accusing their school of racism after they say staff ripped down Black Lives Matter posters they'd put up. At least one student took her allegations to the board. It met last night and in a statement says there will be a formal investigation into the concerns raised, and the Catholic diocese will also mediate between the school and the students. The principal of Marist has not specifically responded to Checkpoint's requests for an interview. But today, Agnes Loheni, a former student at the college and now a National List MP, contacted Checkpoint, keen to wade into the debate in support of the school. She says no one asked her to, and she hasn't spoken recently to the principal or the board. But Agnes Loheni told me schools shouldn't be a political playground.
I absolutely support Black Lives Matter. George Floyd's life mattered. But I fear that actually the movement of Black Lives Matter has actually been hijacked in America from those who want to play politics. We've heard over the years demands to get rid of police, to get rid of prisons, to get rid of the court system. To me, that's politics. That's not to say that the girls at the school shouldn't be discussing these issues. It's a big issue, and they should be discussed definitely in the classroom, as these issues were when I was at school. We talked about things happening overseas, local issues. It's exactly where that debate happens in the classroom with the teachers.
But what about what is happening is turning Marist into a political playground?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that schools should be allowed to adhere to their rules and their values. That's not to say that if a school doesn't want particular posters up after a period of time, that is obviously the girls have seen that as something racist, or they've talked about some other things in the past. I think that the schools should be entitled to make those decisions. And look, I may be supportive of my girls doing things, but I would not be supportive of them breaking school rules.
Right, so let's just be clear on this then. Are you suggesting that putting up the posters broke the school rules, and so that a young woman involved here should just sit by and say nothing about racism in order to be in alignment with the rules of the school? No,
I'm not saying that. The posters were up for a week.
How do you know that, Agnes? How do you know that the posters, who's told you this? Because you said that you've read some of the material about what's gone on. Who are you talking to at the school? Who's telling you this?
Well, I understand the posters were up for a week.
How do you know that?
And, well, I know someone from the school.
Have you been speaking to the principal or teachers?
I'm not going to give who I was speaking to. My understanding is the posters were up for a week.
Okay, well, Agnes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's really important because I'm trying to understand why you were speaking out now. And in order to do that, I need to know what conversations you've had with people at the school, like principals.
I'm speaking out. This is a school that I went to. It's a school where me as a brown-skinned person was encouraged to look across at international events to debate these issues. But absolutely, I felt no racism at all towards me at the school. This is the school that supported my endeavours in terms of my Polynesian background, being in the Polynesian group for years. It's a school that supported me to travel to Germany. It's a school that supported me to get the senior chemistry prize. It's a school that supported me to get the pathway to being a chemical engineer.
So you were at the school 30 years ago, though, weren't you, Agnes?
Yes, I was.
And that's Agnes Loheni. But Pasifika community leader and Auckland Councillor Efeso Collins says taking down the posters was an act of aggression and an abuse of power. Today he tweeted in support of the students, saying teachers aren't the sole source of knowledge and power. I spoke to him earlier and asked him to explain what he meant.
I see it as an abuse of teacher power because the teachers know that students have very few, they have a low confidence level when it comes to recourse. And so if a teacher was to go and rip down a sign or say something to you directly or indirectly, that means that your views don't matter, that you're actually inferior. A student's going to be very nervous about having some recourse and coming back to you on that. And that's why I think it shows the teacher and student imbalance. It's a really poor way to approach a relationship.
So what should they have done then, if not take the posters down?
Yeah, they should have reached out to the students. They should have asked them, look, if you're calling for a meeting, if you want to have some kind of assembly about this issue, let's understand why. And this isn't the case that's been taken. I used to teach teacher education at the University of Auckland and at Laidlaw College. And any Freirean thinker who wrote books like Pedagogy of the Oppressed will know that students are often seen as passive receptors of information. And so the abuse of power is when Efeso, the teacher, comes along and says, well, you just receive the information, you receive how I treat you, and you've got no way to come back on it. That's not how we conduct ourselves anymore. We've got to create safe learning environments where people feel they can have a kōrero, a conversation, and that's not what's been going on here. In my view, it's a clear abuse of teacher position.
What about rules, though, Efeso? What about rules and asking permission to do things? And I'm not suggesting that these kids didn't ask permission, but a lot of people are getting in touch saying, well, were they allowed to put the posters up on the walls? Did they have permission? Does any of that matter?
Yeah, it does matter, and I'm sure that the students who would have been involved would know that there are rules related to how they put things up on a general bulletin board at a school. So I don't see any problem with the students putting it up. The problem here is the teachers haven't reached out to have a nice conversation and ask them what their concerns are. Are there better ways to encourage people to talk about racism, to talk about what's going on globally, and have a wider conversation? That's not what's happened here. All that's happened here is the students come out, stepped out, and said, we want to raise these issues, and a teacher has ripped down their posters. I wonder if in many schools we're suffering from a phobia around adolescence. We've got young people who want to march against climate change. We've got young people who want to talk about racism, and yet we've got teachers who are abusing their power by ripping down their posters. The clear message from that is those students' ideas are inferior to the teacher.
Or are those ideas scary to teachers? Because Marist is not the only school that is involved in controversy over the Black Lives Matter movement. Is it that it's controversial, too hard basket, so let's pretend it's not happening?
I think that might be what it is. Anyone who's talked about media studies, social studies or history will know that there are some really challenging topics that you have to confront. My wife used to be a social studies teacher, and for a long time people didn't want to know about the Mau, where New Zealand police shot dead 11 of our people back in 1929. A lot of our teachers think, oh, that's too hard. We don't want to confront those issues. But anyone who does social studies will know that those are important issues that we need to discuss. If we approach education from a socially just perspective, then we're all able to have honest, mature conversations. You don't have honest, mature conversations by ripping down other people's posters. That's not your property. You shouldn't be ripping it down. Maybe the next discussion is how you treat other people's property.
Efeso, some people listening to this are going to go, well, the teacher is in charge. It's only a poster. They have the right to pull it down.
The same way the student has the right to put it up. And what we need now is a mature teacher who's going to walk alongside the students and say, let's have a discussion, rather than go out and just pull down a poster, which is a pretty aggressive act. We've got to remember that that's a pretty aggressive act. That's somebody else's poster. My guess is there was no profanity on that poster. There was nothing aggressive about that poster. It was a desire to have a discussion about these issues. The teacher needs to reach out to the students and ask them, can we have a discussion? In fact, you could really build some really good schooling curricula out of these activities and what's going on at the moment. So yeah, we've often seen schools as the teacher is in charge. What we want is a much fairer approach to education. The teacher doesn't know everything. They're not the sole source of all knowledge. You gather knowledge, you garner knowledge by being able to share ideas. You and I are sharing ideas at the moment. You don't know more than me the same way I don't know more than you. So we respectfully have a conversation, and that's what needs to happen in this instance.
So do you know Agnes Loheni, who's the National MP?
Yes, we went to university together.
Oh, interesting, because she says that school is not the place for politics.
Oh, well, for someone who's a politician herself, I would disagree personally. I have a lot of respect for Agnes, but I disagree with that comment, because what you want in a school is the ability to have wide conversations. We all know in any workplace there is politics. We know on the sports field there's politics. So I think that's a very narrow definition of what politics is. This is about how we treat, how we robustly approach different ideas. You know, some people may have been offended and said, well, I don't want a Black Lives Matter poster up. I want an All Lives Lives Matter poster up. Well, that's the best place to have that discussion. But just ripping down someone's poster is clearly someone saying to somebody else who's in a teacher position that your ideas aren't welcome here, that my ideas are better than yours, you're inferior, and so there's no room for the discussion. I'm glad the school is now reaching out to both the students and some of their whānau to have this talk, but it shouldn't have happened the way it did.
And that is Efeso Collins. And Checkpoint approached the Auckland Catholic Diocese for comment. Its Vicar of Education, Catherine Ryan, says they wish to support the students and staff in resolving the current issues. She says until they have had the opportunity to listen to the concerns raised, it's not appropriate for her to comment.